Welcome back to AutoTechNick. Now we're back on our F355 project, and today's video is going to be a little bit different than usual. I'll tell you why in just a second. So before we get into why today's video is going to be different than what you typically see here on the channel, I want to take a second and get you guys caught back up where we're at with this 355 project. You can see the car is sitting on the lift. We have it undercover, and essentially there's nothing that we have left to do to the body of the car at the moment. There is still some more work that we're going to need to be doing to the car. Primarily is what we're going to need to do is get in here and replace the radiator. I need to replace all of the fuel filters, and also we're going to be putting all new coolant hoses in the car. The problem with this is our radiator is actually on back order, so we're waiting for that to arrive. And you can see that I have attached some casters here on the bottom of the car, and I actually have the car sitting over here on the front wheels. That way, if I need to move the car off the lift, I can without having the drivetrain in the car. Now over here for the drivetrain, on the last video you guys saw on this engine here on the channel, we went through and finalized our timing belts. So we have all of our new timing belts on the car. They're tensioned, they're degreed. You can see everything. It's torqued to the spec, torque striped, and we're really ready to get into the reassembly of this engine and the drivetrain, although there is a lot of loose odds and ends I need to take care of on it. And then that brings us back to why this video is going to be different than what we typically see here on the channel. Now, typically on the channel, I try to cover one subject when I'm working on a car from start to finish, and as much detail as I feel it's needed for the video. Well, from what I have left to do today to this car, I have a bunch of smaller odds and ends and tasks that I need to take care of. And frankly, none of those items are long enough to constitute their own individual video, and they're moderately interesting enough to constitute their own video, if that makes any sense. But it creates a bit of a problem for myself because I want to capture this work for a couple different reasons. I want to capture it for all of you guys watching so you can see everything that I'm doing to the car. And a lot of these smaller tasks may help some of you out with your projects at home, so I want to get them captured and highlight what we're doing. I also want to show all these smaller tasks that I do during a timing belt service. Everyone knows, sure, we're doing timing belts to a car, but there's actually a lot more that goes into it, so I want to have that covered and documented and really just make everyone aware of everything that goes into these services. And lastly, and this is probably the main reason why I want to capture all this stuff, I want this stuff captured on video and documented for the owner of the car, because I really view it as a much better or superior version of a service record, because we know service records on these cars are really everything, but if we have video proof of what we did, why we did it, and I'm talking you through it, I feel that's so much more valuable. So because this video is really meant to capture all this smaller work, today's video is going to feel a bit different because we're going to be jumping around quite a bit, but we have a lot to cover, and there's just really still a lot that we have left to do to this car. Now, where we're at today, as you can see, I have everything pretty much ready to start buttoning the engine back up. So that means putting the cam covers back on, our plenums, fuel injectors. We have our clutch that we need to take care of. There's a lot of smaller loose odds and ends, and that's really where I'm going to start with today. You can see right here that I have my valve covers or cam covers ready to go. We have some new cap nuts, all of our gaskets. I still have to trim these to fit and get them put on. All my sealants. Even have our fresh spark plugs. A client supplied a ignition coil and new wires, and that is because he actually, when he had the car, replaced this one coil and the wires over here on bank 2, did not do bank 1. I said that won't be a problem. I can get that stuff put on for you while I'm servicing it, so we're gonna get that stuff put on. These are some new vacuum check valves we're gonna take care of. All this stuff we're going to cover a little bit later, so that's really where I'm going to start today. But before we get any further, it's worth mentioning that I've already started, and you can see that I have my injectors here in the ultrasonic cleaner. So I've already gone through and done my initial checks on the injectors where I run them and check the resistance of them. I ran through, did a spray test, a leak test, a flow test. I get all those numbers thrown into my Excel sheet here so I can track the difference before we clean them and after we clean them. So we're going to run them in our ultrasonic cleaner here. It's going to cycle through the injectors. Once they're done and cleaned, they go back into the machine. I run them again, get all that data so we can get a good before and after. You can see I just have 4 injectors in here for bank 1. We'll get those taken care of. Bank 2 are back there on the bench. Once those are done, they go in the machine, I run those. So I'm not running that now because the ultrasonic cleaner is very noisy, creates a lot of noise. I don't want to have it here on the video, but I'm going to turn that on and have that running when I'm working to put the cam covers back on the engine. Now, previously, a couple weeks ago, I already spent a little bit of time and dug into some issues that we had with the parking brake on the car. So my plan of attack here is I'm going to set you guys down. I'm going to focus on getting my cam covers reinstalled back to the engine, spark plug wires, all those things. I've covered that in great detail in previous projects in the channel, so there's not a lot to see here. I'm gonna get my injectors running, I'm gonna have those cleaning. We're gonna jump over to the footage of me digging into the parking brakes that I did a couple weeks ago. And then once we're done with that footage, I should have the cam covers on, our injector should be cleaned, I should be working on bank 2 injectors, and I'll get you guys caught up with where we're at on the engine and what we're gonna be heading into next. We're gonna kick this off today with our parking brakes. And you can see I already have the rotors off and have access to our parking brake shoes on both sides. Now I did that because I needed to get an inspection on the condition of the shoes and the hardware, because I needed to see if I was gonna have to order parts or not. That was the only reason I dove into it before we even got here. Now, the reason why we're looking into the parking brakes, because when we had the car fully assembled when it arrived, the parking brake did work, the ratchet was working, but it was not holding the car at all. The cable felt like it had pretty much no tension on it. It would just come all the way up to the end limit of its travel. And when we pulled the drivetrain out of the car, I'll bring you guys around to this side. Our adjustment here, this is our park brake cable, and the cable from the car comes in to this bracket right here, and it ties in here and has an adjustment. It was maxed out, meaning they had the screws tightened all the way in where we could not put any more tension on this cable, so we were completely out of adjustments on the cable. Now let's talk about adjusting the parking brake on a 355. The adjustment here, think of it as your fine-tuning adjustment. So you're not going to make gross adjustments on it. It's just basically going to fine-tune how your handle feels inside the car. It's not necessarily going to adjust your parking brake so it's working correctly. We're going to make those adjustments right here. So just like a typical drum brake setup as what this is, we make our adjustments here on this. And obviously the thickness and wear rate of our shoes in relation to the diameter of the inside of our rotor, that all dictates where these have to be adjusted. And if those are grossly loose, we're not going to have enough room to make any corresponding adjustments here on the cable. So I'm hoping that's the case. Now if we rewind all the way back to the first 355 major service that I did here on the channel, I actually discussed that when I pull the drivetrain out, I don't leave this e-brake cable sitting here like this. I actually take a zip tie and run the zip tie through this bracket right here to this cable to leave some tension on it, just a little bit like so. And I talked about doing that because if you leave this loose, and you can obviously push this cable in right now, it's going to disconnect the cable from the mechanism that expands the shoes down here in the hub where it comes in. And then what happens is you can get everything reassembled, you can make your adjustments at the parking brake, your handle pulls up and has tension because you're usually just pulling on one cable, and it feels okay, but the parking brake doesn't work, and you only will notice if the car doesn't stay on a hill where it wants to slide down. So knowing that I already had a parking brake issue on this car, I didn't bother with zip tying that cable because I knew I was going to be investigating it anyways, and that's where we're at now. So the only thing I've done so far is I've brake cleaned both sides to get all the dust and grime off of our shoes. I've inspected our shoes, and they are getting pretty worn on our leading edge here. The other side's quite a bit worse. Let me show you guys. So you can see it's getting a little thin down there, and up here it's getting a little thin as opposed to the back edge, which is pretty much new. Try not to wash you out with my light. So that's not ideal. Certainly not ideal. I think I'll be able to make the adjustments that I need inside the rotors and the drums to get those expanded more, so that way we then have the space and what we need on the cables. But there's a couple other things at play, because we could have stretched cables, or we could, as I just discussed, we could actually have one of the cables detached from the mechanism here at the hub. So we need to do that first. That's our number one step, is we need to make sure that that cable right here in the hub is properly attached. And you can't see it down in there right now. Let me grab another light. All right, that's way better. So there's basically, you can see right in the center, there is a pin, and that cable pulls that pin back, which is going to lever this out, which is going to expand our two shoes. Now, short of disassembling everything, the easiest way to check and make sure that that is still attached is you generally can pull the cable out back here, the sheathing of the cable out in the back. And then you can see right there, I'm pulling on the cable. Get it right there. So you can see that I'm actually pulling and having the mechanism move, and it's actually pushing our shoes out right there. That tells me that everything is still connected and hooked up. So we have what we need right there. And as I just did that, there you go. That's exactly what I was talking about. So it was hooked up, and then I was operating that, showing you, and this came unhooked. so you guys can see how easy that is to get that disconnected. It's the same thing on the other side. I did check that one earlier and it is functioning. So I did have them both functioning. Now I don't. So I need to go back in on this side and get our cable hooked back in. So there's basically on this mechanism that expands our shoes, it hooks in right here on the cable. So I need to get that set up. So that's step number one. I need to confirm that both of these are connected properly. Then we're going to come back and we're going to make our adjustments back here on our parking brake shoes. And you do that with the rotor on, and you can see we have this upper hole right here where you work a screwdriver in, and we can actually rotate this out. I usually expand this until my shoes hit the rotor and lock up, and then I bring it in several clicks. I kind of go by hand because once I get the rotor freed up, maybe I spin this over a revolution, like one full revolution. Then I'll actually wait until the engine's back in the car, and it's basically, I will then adjust my park brake cable that connects right here, and I'll do that essentially to get good feel on the handle, and then I'll adjust the shoes to make sure it holds the car properly. Both adjustments will obviously affect each other, but that's the best way I could describe it. Like your adjustments here at the shoes are what are responsible for holding the car. Your adjustment on the cable at the midway point where we disconnect it is responsible for how the handle feels and how far it pulls up before it stops via resistance. Now, to circle back and talk about the shoes, how I was saying the leading edge is worn more than the trailing edge on the other shoe, which is normal. That's a normal wear pattern of parking brake or drum shoes because they wedge into the rotor. So these parking brake shoes should only be touching the rotor when the car is stopped and the rotors are not rotating. So it's not like they actually need to physically be slowing down the car or create friction and heat to slow the rotor down. The car should be stopped, you apply the parking brake, they engage and lock it in place and release it. So let's say that that was a set of rear drum brakes, maybe we would consider replacing them, but in the sense that it's just a parking brake, they're fine as long as we can get the adjustments we need. So I'm just going to dive in and fix this cable that I accidentally popped out, get that taken care of. I'm going to reinstall the rotors, and then we're going to work to get the shoes adjusted to the rotors. And I think that's essentially as far as we're going to be able to go today, because we're going to have the drivetrain back into the car before we can do anything else. But first, I need to get this cable fixed. All right, so for today, my misfortune is your guys' gain. As you can see, I have all the shoes and all the hardware off of our knuckle here. I have everything up here on the bench, and as I said, everything's fully removed. My process of removing it was to take our lower spring right here off of both shoes. Then you have these 10mm bolts that bottom out. Note, they are different from side to side, and they bolted in like so, and they're holding these true to the backing plate slash hub. And we need to get, I mean, you could probably try to wrestle with all this stuff with leaving this on, but this is so easy to get off. I just popped it off. I leave everything connected up here because we're just doing this to connect our cable back up to our linkage. So right here is the hook. That's what I was talking about. That's where our cable over there, it slid off of this when I pushed the cable forward. But when that cable is hooked on right here, these two spots right here, actually this spot right here and right there, is going to sit in this notch here on our shoes. So when you pull this forward, you can see that it is expanding those. Okay? And this part went forward. So it went to the car like that, right up and in there. And then you can see that it hooks right there. So is what happens when you push the cable just a little bit forward, it'll slide out just like that. In the end, this is a great example of why I was saying put a zip tie on your cable once you first disconnect your parking brake, so this doesn't have to happen, because if this does happen, you're pulling your calipers, you're pulling your rotors, you're pulling all of your parking brake shoes to get all that put back together. Now you guys have a good visual, you can see what's in there, what to watch out for. I'm going to work to get this reinstalled, reassembled the way it needs to be, and get the rotor back on. You can see I've already went and got this one back on, so that way we can get ready to make our adjustments. One thing I forgot to mention, with the rotors off, you can see that I came in here and really cleaned up where the parking brake shoes sit on the inside of the rotor. So really my point of getting in here is to make sure that everything is clean, functional, assembled correctly, essentially ensuring, getting my hands and eyes on it and ensuring everything is adjusted, assembled correctly and how it needs to be, because we need to go through this for a process of elimination to either fix the problem or identify what is the true cause of the problem. Otherwise, we're just kind of bouncing around the system, making guesses what's causing the parking brake not to work properly. This really all isn't too much work. I'm probably over explaining it, but you guys know me. You should know me by now. That's what I do. I'm going to get this reassembled, rotor back on, bring you guys back, and just kind of show you. It's pretty straightforward when you're making these adjustments with the screwdriver. I'll just show you that real quick. And yeah, we'll just go from there. All right, so we're all reassembled. Everything's connected, and I've actually already gone through and adjusted this side. Now, to make my adjustments, I'll take a screwdriver and just set it in the vents of the rotor. That way I can rotate everything and see if it's moving. You position this hole up here at the very top of your travel, and you can take a screwdriver and get in there and get on that star that's in between your two parking brake shoes. Now, you can also, which I do recommend, is using a small flashlight. You can get in there, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to get you guys in there. Get my light, can I get it? Ooh, right there. So right there you can see our star adjuster. Now, which direction you end up rotating that star adjuster to either expand or retract the parking brake shoes really is dependent on how everything is installed, meaning there's not one set way, because you can install that star adjuster in either direction. So generally is what I'll do is before I start is I'll peek in there with my light and I'll see how much thread is basically sticking out of the star adjuster, and then I'll start making some adjustments one way or the other. I'll go back and check and see if I'm either extracting it or compressing that extractor, and that lets me know which direction I need to go. In this case, I had to rotate everything down, and what I'll do is I'll rotate that just by feel with this other screwdriver here, and I'll just kind of rotate the rotor to make sure it's free. I expand the shoes until they stop. You'll feel the resistance on your star adjuster. It gets a little tight, and then I'll use this to confirm that, yep, my shoes are touching the rotors. And then in this application, I just went and backed it off 10 what I call clicks, or 10 little teeth on it, because you just do one tooth at a time, rotated it back, and that's going to be our starting point for our adjustments once everything's back in the car. So with that done, I need to come over here, do the same thing, make my adjustments over here, and that's really as far as we're going to be able to go until we have the drivetrain in the car. You can see that I've done my zip tie on my cable so everything stays in place and everything's sorted. So we will know that our shoes are in good condition, and the wear of our shoes won't dictate our cable adjustment at this point, because I'm able to adjust them to where they just touch and back off. We're adjusting the shoes up here at the top and pushing them out. That has no change on the bottom where our cable attaches, meaning we know everything inside the rotor is good, even though we have worn shoes versus new shoes. So if we still have issues where we can't get everything adjusted properly, we could start considering a stretch cable, because we know everything in here is good. It's sorted and it's how it needs to be. So I'm going to get this one taken care of, and then I'll probably bring you guys back as we continue on with other miscellaneous items during this repair or this service. And then at the tail end of the service, I'll definitely bring you guys back in this video while we finish up our adjustments on our parking brakes. That way it's all inclusive and that information's here. And yeah, I don't know what's next on the list, because I'm actually going to jump off and start cleaning everything up and move into my camshaft timing and that, which is a separate video. But for now, parking brakes are taken care of, or they will be in a second, and I'll see you guys back here in a few minutes. All right, so you guys can see that I'm cruising now on the second set of injectors. I already did the pre-flow test on them. I ran them in the ultrasonic cleaner. So we have our pre-numbers. We're just running through the last test on the post numbers. That way we'll be able to populate all of our charts and graphs here on my Excel sheet. So I'm going to focus on getting that taken care of, and then I'll bring it back, show you how much progress we made on the engine, and then also talk about the next list of items that we're going to get taken off our checklist. So I just finished with the last 4 injectors, so let's get you guys caught up with where we're at. We'll start with our injectors, and now that we have them all flow tested, cleaned, and reflow tested, really we can see on our charts here that this is the deviation number for my beforehand at the 3 different flow rates here. So our static flow, this is 650 RPM, 4,500 RPM, and 6,000. And you can see we're at a deviation of 16%, 16, 19, and 13. So that really is our percentage deviation from the lowest flowing injector to the highest flowing injector. After all of our work and cleaning, our deviation dropped down to 10%, 12, 10, and 10, which is about on par, I would say. Sometimes if you find a set of injectors that are really dirty, haven't been serviced in a very long time, those numbers are a lot worse and they clean up real nice. But having a deviation where we're at there around 10%, completely acceptable. It's really what I would expect. Not huge gains, but it's one of those things where This is just an additional data point. We know they're good now. We can put them in the car, and it's one more thing that we know it's going to run good and just really be dialed and set for the client once he gets it back. So the injectors are taken care of. I'll get those out of the machine, get that put away. Unfortunately, I'm waiting for new O-rings before I can put them back into the engine. So that's going to prevent me from getting the plenums put back on the engine. But you can see that our valve covers or cam covers are back on the engine. I have the new spark plug wires on. I have our spark plug wire covers on. I got all the wires routed nice and cleanly here. As you can see, we got our new coil on these wires. I also put back on our non-return valves right here for our secondary air. And when I pulled those off, I did test those. They're just one-way valves to make sure that air goes in but not back out. They're both functioning and working good, so we have those back on and just really aiding with reassembly. The cam sensor housings here, they're back on. You can see them right back there, so that's taken care of. Everything's sealed up and torqued to the spec. And also I'll bring you in here, you can see no sealant sticking out. Went back through, cleaned up all of our sealant, and made everything look really nice and pretty. Sometimes these gaskets stick out right there, so I trim them there, but there's no sealant oozing out. I really like to spend a little bit of time and attention just making those look nice. Some of you with a keen eye might notice that these valve covers have been re-powder coated, and they did not take off the powder coat on these ribs and for the Ferrari font right here. That's one thing I mentioned to the client he's aware of. He kind of is trying to decide if he wants to leave it this way or go through and take that finish off himself. I offered to get that taken care of for him, but he decided to kind of hold off and make up his mind on that. So I cleaned them up the best I could. I love this red powder coat on these valve covers, this red wrinkle, but man, it is so hard to get any stains and oil and grime out of. No matter what I've tried every kind of cleaner, everything possible, and these are about as good as I can ever get them, which they look pretty good, but my OCD, I wish I could get them a little bit better. So where are we going to move on to next? Well, there's a couple things here. One, as part of the service, I've talked about it many times, bring you guys around where we can see a little bit better. Here we go. These vacuum check valves right here, there's one on either side, there's one right there. We need to get those replaced, but this car, it's got, 60,000 miles, it's seen a lot of use. All of our vacuum lines are starting to get pretty beat. They're getting old, hard, starting to crack. Found a few of them that are cracking. So you can see they run in right here. There's more vacuum lines in the center right there, in between the two throttle bodies, up here where they go to the fuel pressure regulator. So I'm actually going to go through and replace all of the vacuum lines in this car. I do keep a big roll of Gates vacuum line on hand, so that way I can go through and do that. And we have our new check valves right here, so we're going to get those new check valves put in. But we're just going to take the couple extra minutes and just put all new vacuum lines in, so that way we can ensure that there's no vacuum leaks. Also, a while back on one of my other videos, I had a viewer and a colleague make mention of replacing the O-rings here on our ports for our measuring points for RTBs and our adjustment screws right there. He was kind enough to give me the part numbers, and I never gave it much thought until he mentioned it, and I think it's a fantastic idea. So you can see I have this port out, and there's an O-ring right on there, and then also on our adjustment screw for the ITBs, there's a small O-ring up there. I already have the old O-rings off, and this was off of the adjustment screw. That one came off pretty decently, but on this port right here, you can see that that O-ring just snapped and broke in half, which is a good thing. We're going to go through and replace them. These are not available separately from Ferrari. You can see I bought them in bulk, and I just have a big pile of them right there. So I need to go through and get all of those replaced. That's going to help keep everything sealed up. That's going to help it be a lot easier to get our ITB synchronized and balanced and have this thing run and idle the way it should. So I need to go through, get those taken care of. And also, we have a kind of, it's hard to see right here, this line for our, right there, you can see this just sticking out. This line feeds back to our fuel purge solenoids back here. Now I have the other side of this line out right here, and this sat in the valley and actually ran underneath and teed into the other half of that line. If you guys look on this line, there was a white T right there that is actually broken. So I've removed this one and drilled that T barb out of there, so I have just the exposed line. And this line is no longer available. That T barb went to this fitting right here that kind of stuck out above the cam cover on the left-hand side. So I ordered a stainless steel just Y fitting, so that way I was like, well, I'll just get this replaced. And at the time I only had this piece of the line out, which it's a 1/4 inch. Well, once I got this other size or end of the line out, I realized that if we look right here, it's not a 1/4 inch, it's much smaller. So I was like, well, okay. I did some searching, then I found a Y fitting right here. Ignore the fact that it's broke, but it was a 6mm and a 4mm. And this 4mm fit a little bit better, but it was still a little loose. And I was like, I figured I could make it work. And if you notice on this one, I've actually bent it. And I did this initially to make it mimic the bend that was with the factory plastic line. That bent no problem. That's what happened here on this brass one. I tried to bend it and it just sheared off. I tried looking for a 6mm/4mm, so 2 4s and 1 6 Y fitting. Could not find one for the life of me. That was in stainless steel. They're all in brass. So as what I ended up deciding that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stainless steel one. It fits very nicely into this hose right here. And if we look on the end, on these ends where they go into the purge solenoids, they just use a piece of silicone vacuum hose essentially. Well, I'll just take a piece of this silicone vacuum hose right here, and this does slide over the outside diameter of this hose right here and onto our barb fitting, and that's going to get us out of this jam. We will have a little bit more robust fitting where we don't have the plastic fitting that's in there. We'll have a stainless one. It's not ideal where we have to use this hose and barb, but where parts are not available, this is a cost-effective repair. This fitting's a couple dollars. Ideally, I would have loved to find one that was like that, but in stainless, but that's what we have. So I'm gonna get this all doctored up and get that stuff installed, get this reinstalled, get our vacuum line all put back in. We have our new vacuum check valves we need to install. Then I need to go through with our fittings here, replace all of our O-rings with the new ones, and really is what I'm gonna be working towards is getting everything buttoned up inside the valley of the engine so that way it's ready to get the plenums back on. You can see I have the wire harness for the fuel injectors kind of fed in here for now. That's to keep them out of the way. So I'll have these out of the way, get the vacuum hoses addressed. I can run these back through. They run through this little opening here between our ITBs, the connector injectors. So I'm gonna spend a little time, get all that routed and sorted, and get as far as we can up here in the valley of the engine so that way, once I get my new O-rings for my injectors, I can put those back in, put the plenums back in, and we are pretty much, for the top part of the engine, I'd say we're pretty much set for there for now. So I will say that this vacuum line and this T-fitting for this purge hose, that's separate. I don't do that as part of the timing belt service. That's because this one was broken on this car. As for our O-rings here, I'm probably gonna start doing that on all 355 timing belt services that I see if I haven't seen the car semi-recently. Meaning if I have a car come in that I've serviced and I've replaced those, I probably won't address those again, but if it's a car I've never seen and they haven't been taken care of, these cars pushing 30 years old, I'm just gonna get those taken care of. It's kind of the same thing as the vacuum hoses. The past couple cars I've done belt services on, it's just they're getting to a point where they're just kind of aging out, where I kind of have to change what I was doing during my services because as these cars are getting older, they're starting to need more things. And I'd rather be proactive and get these vacuum hoses taken care of now than have to be reactive and have the car have a problem, have it come back, me have to diagnose it, and then replace them. Vacuum hose is cheap, access is great. We're gonna take care of this stuff now. So just one of those extra steps that I'm taking care of during the service that's gonna ensure that the car is reliable and trouble-free for the client. Welcome back. It's a fresh day. It's actually a new week, but we're still continuing to make progress on our 355 project. Before we talk in what we're going to address today, let's get you caught back up to where we left off last week. And you can see that I finished up getting the vacuum lines all replaced up here. I even went and got the vacuum lines in between our ITBs replaced up here to our fuel pressure regulators. You can see that I have the fuel injectors and fuel rails all reinstalled. Everything's connected. And went through, like I mentioned, all the vacuum lines, everything is all replaced. Our vacuum check valves right back here, we got those new ones in. We got that new one in. Oh, I also almost forgot to show you our down in there. We can see it's getting kind of crowded, but our fuel purge line with our T-fitting we have in with those extra silicone hoses, that turned out really nicely. So we have that sitting right there. And really everything up in the valley is taken care of. And with the fuel rails back in with my injectors, I was waiting on some O-rings. Those came in over the weekend, so I got those reinstalled just now. I'm at the point where we're free and clear to work and get our plenums reinstalled on the engine. And that's really gonna tie off the top of the engine and have everything finished up there. As for the front of the engine, for today, I'm gonna get my front timing covers reinstalled. I can get my crank pulley reinstalled, and then we can take care of our AC drive belt. And I think the only other thing we can take care of on the card after that is going to be addressing our clutch and getting all that reassembled. But before we talk about the clutch, I want to come over here and show you our timing covers. So we talked about it on the disassembly of the car, but our timing covers have some pretty significant cracking. As you can see right there, there's, I believe, a smaller one here on the side. They're both covers, you can see there's a crack right there, are cracked in multiple locations. These covers, not available new anymore. No longer available. No option to buy new ones. We could not find any used covers either, so we had no option but to reuse these covers or try to fix these covers. So I talked to the client and I told him from the get-go that I think our chances of fixing these covers are low, but we have nothing to lose, let's give it a shot. So I started here at this cover, and you can see on the back side, I beveled that out, and this is the one section I've tried to repair. Now, I beveled that out, and if you look on that plastic, you can see where it looks like it's melted on the outside edges. The first thing that I tried to do to repair it is using this, which is a plastic welder. It's basically a soldering iron that heats up the end of this tip, and you're able to feed your plastic in through the center, and this is gonna melt the parent material on either side and melt this plastic going in the center and run it into the channel. And one interesting thing to note is once I would heat this plastic up, it's like it would bubble and boil and off gas. It really wouldn't melt, so that you can see that really unusual looking parts on the sides of it. Long story short, I did that and I was able to get that plastic melted in there, but you can see that it basically just took the perfect shape of the V that we grooved in there and just popped free and clear and came right out. It did not bond to it whatsoever. It had no strength, and it's pretty impressive how well this just popped right back off, because you can see that it was in there quite nice, and the repair looked nice until I gave this a little flex and it popped right off. The next thing I tried was this right here, which is a panel bond adhesive, really commonly used in the auto body or auto collision industry. You can use this to bond metal to metal, fiberglass to metal, plastics to metal, plastics to plastics. It's incredibly robust stuff. Believe it or not, when you're using this on metal to metal joints, this is stronger than the parent metal itself. It's really amazing stuff. Obviously I had this on hand, so I gave that a shot. It was the same thing. I got it in there, it looked nice, let it cure, gave this cover a little flex, popped right out. Wasn't gonna work. So then, in an attempt of desperation, I tried this product, and this is a pretty interesting product. This is a Plastifix, you can see right here, and it is a plastic powder. I don't know if you guys can see very well inside that. Let me get this right here. So if you look in there, it's a very, very fine powder. It's incredibly fine. And you're supposed to mix it with the activator, this liquid, and that turns this powder into a plastic. But I actually was able to take that plastic and just basically filled this channel with it so it was level. Then I took this liquid and I was able to drop that on the plastic and have it turn in the plastic right there and dry and cure. And again, with that method, I was able to make this look very nice. It was going to be a very pleasing, aesthetically pleasing repair. It was going to look great. Once I got that done, let it cure, same thing right here. You can see it cured into this nice plastic, and it popped and broke right off and came out. So really at this point, I was talking to the client and I'm like, nothing's working and we kind of need to cut our losses. We don't have any good options. We did toy with the idea of 3D printing a set of timing covers. We have another viewer of the channel that's really into 3D printing that kind of told us it was feasible. We could laser scan them and print them, but we had some reservations on the appearance of how factory they would look, the finish, the color, the texture. But also for me, my biggest reservation on that was its temperature resistance, because from what we can gather, this is some kind of thermoplastic, and then this car, from all the track use that it's seen, it's gotten so hot, all the heat cycles, and this plastic starting to degrade and break. I'm concerned that if this plastic is doing that with a 3D print plastic, what it's going to do. So after talking to the client, he ultimately decided that he's just going to keep an eye out until he can find a set of timing covers, and he'll put them on or buy them, and then once he has the engine out for the next timing belt service, he'll put them on. So that means for these timing belt covers, they're just going to have to be the way they are, and we have really no other good option but to install them as is. It's not ideal, but we gave it an attempt. We tried to fix it. Nothing was working. So like I mentioned, rather than just continuing to spend time on them, we're just going to cut our losses and get them reinstalled. Now, I will say that we're waiting on other parts for this car, so naturally we're going to keep an eye out for timing covers, and if a set pops up before we put the engine back in the car, we will get them and get them installed. But if not, these are the ones we're going to run and use. So that's what I have ahead of me right now. You can see I have all my hardware for the plenums set out, so we can get both plenums installed. We got our hardware here for our timing covers. We're going to need to get these on first, then we'll move into the crank pulley, get our drive belt for the AC compressor on and tensioned. We can get the compressor tightened up. And I'll actually bring you back and show you this stuff from last week. All of our O-rings that we had for our hardware, for our ITBs, you can see that almost all of it broke and came off. So definitely a good thing that we went through and got that replaced. It's really going to ease our ability to synchronize them. It's going to make sure we have no vacuum leaks. Everything's going to just run better, adjust better, hold its adjustment better. And then you can see all the vacuum lines here that I took out. And you can see just how heat damaged these are. And they're basically just falling apart. This plastic's so brittle. This is the worst I've ever seen for these check valves. But as I mentioned earlier, I replace them no matter what. They're inexpensive. They cause a lot of problems. They frequently fail. So we got those taken care of. So we have all the old vacuum line there. I'm going to set that aside with the rest of the parts that I pulled off the car. I do save all the parts that I pull off a car. And at the end of the repairs, I give the client the option if they want to pick them up with the car or not. And just one thing that I've always done and that I continue to do. I'm going to work to get the rest of the stuff reinstalled, and then once I'm done with that, I'm going to bring you guys back because it's time at that point to start talking about our transmission and clutch. Now it's starting to look like it should. It's starting to look like a complete engine. Now that we have the plenums on, our front timing covers on, we got the crank pulley on, the AC belt, all of our vacuum lines, vacuum hoses, everything's connected, and we're pretty well set up here on the engine. Pretty much taken care of. So like I promised with that, it's time to turn our attention back here to our clutch and transmission. Now I think we'll talk about the transmission first, because on the teardown video we talked about this transmission, and when we drained the oil, we found considerable amounts of metal in the oil. Also, when I drove the car, there was quite a bit of gear wind coming from the transmission. Now, shifting was pretty reasonable. A lot of these gearboxes, they're pretty tight when they're cold, and they get a lot better when they warm up. So there was really nothing super abnormal with the ability to get this in through each gear, but there was a gear whine. Did quite a bit of talking with the client. We really deliberated on this quite a bit. I told the client that the best thing that I could tell him really is I needed to pull the gearbox from the car. I needed to pull the intermediate plate or the front plate off of the gearbox so I could get in, get a good inspection of the gears, and see what is causing the noise. That's the problem right now. I don't know what is causing the noise. I don't know where the metal is coming from. I will say there's the 3 small inspection plates on the bottom side of the transmission, and when I drained the oil out of the car, I pulled those plates off, and I was trying to look up in there to see if I could find the source of the metal and the noise, and I couldn't really see anything. And I will say that those plates are still off the transmission, hence why I still have a drain pan underneath of it. So once we get the engine back in the car and the car's up in the air, we're gonna go back and spend a little bit more time looking up in there to see if we can determine what the problem is. Given the use that the client has planned for this car and the cost of what it would, if we need to do anything inside this transmission, it's gonna get very expensive very quick. For example, we're not counting labor. This is only the price and parts. If this thing needs, say, a synchronizer or a gear, it's probably a minimum of $6,000 in parts for that one component. And you know how it goes once you get in there and you start inspecting all these components of a gearbox with 60,000 miles. A complete gearbox overhaul on this car, I think, is a little bit unrealistic. It's probably more economical and more in line with this car, given its history and its use, to just put a good used gearbox in the car rather than to go through and do a full rebuild, because it's just going to get so outrageous on the price. So with all that being said, after talking to the client, he's like, hey, you know, I'm not going to drive the car a whole lot. I'm not overly worried about it right now. So, you know, we did talk, and He does think that if he does have a gearbox issue with this car, he's just going to pull this gearbox out and put a used gearbox in the car. He sees no point in going into this gearbox and finding the cause of the problem and trying to rectify it. And I don't think he's wrong. You can find used gearboxes for $10,000, $13,000. So if one component of this gearbox is going to cost potentially $6,000, and you know you're not going to get away with just using one gear or synchronizer or bearing, there's going to be more to it. That is probably the better way to go. So he's like, hey, you know what? I don't drive the car a whole lot. I don't plan on driving the car a whole lot. So let's just let it be. And if the gearbox fails, I know it's going to fail. I'll address it then, and I'll put in a good used gearbox. But I'm going to get all the life out of this gearbox that I could. So our plan is we're going to run a couple ATF flushes through the gearbox, the oil cooler, once the car's back together, just to get as much of that gunk and metal and grime cleaned out of there as much as we can. Put new oil in it. Like we mentioned earlier, I'm going to look up through those 3 access plates to see if I can see anything that we can get an idea of what is causing this issue. Put it back together, and it's going to see how long it lasts for him. So with the gearbox, that's the situation. I was secretly hoping I was going to be able to get in there, take it apart, and show you guys, because it's super interesting inside these gearboxes. But I understand the situation. It's not economical. It's not feasible for this particular situation and this particular car. But we still have to address the clutch. Here's the clutch that we pulled out of the car. You can see we're putting a new clutch in. This is a factory organic clutch. There's nothing fancy about it. It's a factory pressure plate, OEM part. Now we pulled out this Kevlar clutch here. I don't know who makes it or what brand it is. So it's an aftermarket pressure plate, or an aftermarket clutch disc, excuse me, the factory pressure plate. Now this is the bell housing with the flywheel. Yeah, 355s are configured pretty weird to have everything facing, you know, your clutch pressure plate facing the back of the engine, which is backwards for most cars, but it's how they have them set up. But this is pretty much how it was when I pulled it out, with the exception that I cleaned everything off. But we can look and you can see that this has been freshly machined. It has a very nice fresh finish. And the only thing that's really interesting, or I say not interesting, but concerning up here, is there's just a little bit of heat mark right there on the outside edge, and it doesn't go all the way around. I guess it goes all the way around, but it's much more concentrated in one area. So that's not ideal, but I'm not overly worried about it. The truth of the matter is, getting this clutch bell housing off, even with the engine in the car, is not terribly that hard. It's nothing compared to a regular car where you have to pull the whole drivetrain or gearbox out of the car. You just really have to pull the rear muffler and boom, it's out. So from talking to the client, like, I don't see anything in here that really gives me a red flag. Yeah, we have a little bit of heat marks here on the outside edge, but there's so much wrong that I found here that I'm willing to take the risk and keep this pressure plate exactly as is, put in our new clutch and pressure plate, and if we have any problems, we'll deal with it then. It's not going to be so much labor to pull it back out and address it, and I think it's worth the risk, because it's hard to justify the expense of tearing down this flywheel and getting this remachined, let alone finding a machine shop that can do the proper taper to it, or buying the aftermarket Hill flywheels. So we're gonna just leave that as is. I'm pretty confident that we're gonna have no problems with it, and I will say, this is something that I'm willing to do on a car that's a 3-pedal car where the driver is controlling the clutch engagement. If I'm dealing with a car that's an F1 car, I would not do this, because the F1 cars, the computers cannot adjust really as well as a human can to compensate for something. Meaning everything on an F1 car has to be exactly how that car was set up and programmed to be, so that way it can operate properly. And if anything is a little bit outside of the computer's parameters, it can adjust, and then you have drivability and shifting problems. If this isn't just exactly dead right, you can easily adjust that on how you release the clutch, engage the throttle, and drive the car. So I'm not overly worried. But talking about wrong, we said we found a whole lot wrong here. If we look, this side of our clutch disc doesn't look too bad in it. You know, you can see the same heat wear on the outside edge where it was rubbing on our flywheel and causing that heat damage. But when you flip it over to this side, this, you can just tell it's absolutely beat up and abused and worn. But I found more damage on the pressure plate right here. You can see that it's just heat marks like you wouldn't believe. This thing's obviously been overheated. This is where the clutch was slipping. It doesn't really look like the clutch. I mean, if it was slipping, it's only touching this outside edge. It wasn't touching all the way in there. And I think that would be an issue with our actual clutch disc here. But you can see that it's actually worn in to our rivets, which is, that's bad. We don't want that. And if I take this right here, you can catch there's an edge right here. So there is so much material worn off the face of this pressure plate that there's actually a big lip on the outside edge. Not to mention, our clutch disc is massively worn on this side versus this side. Just look at the gap of that recess right there to where the rivets are versus this side. It's a lot thinner. If I get you guys in here, you should be able to see the thickness difference on the two halves. So this side is just very worn, very abused. But where this all really comes in and matters is how it's all assembled. Because I have this setting here, and I just took my calipers, set it up there, and measured the height difference of the top of the clutch disc here to the foot of the pressure plate where it's going to sit on the flywheel. And if I bring this over right there, you can see that our height is, I mean, it's like 3 millimeters plus difference. Meaning, there's all that extra space. That's less clamping power on that clutch setup because we have so much wear on the clutch and the pressure plate. What I expect, or what I assume happened in the past, is I assume that when this aftermarket clutch disc was installed, they clearly reused the factory pressure plate, which it's hard to say chicken or the egg. Did all that wear on that pressure plate come from this clutch disc, or was it previous wear on that pressure plate? It's hard to say, but if we have a bigger gap, that means we're doing less compression of the springs when we're installing them, so there's less actual clamping load on the clutch, less pressure there holding it. So essentially, with that big of a gap, almost 3 millimeters, I don't care what clutch you have in there, it's not going to grab and hold. It's going to slip, and once it starts slipping that much, it's just going to go through and destroy everything. So I'm thinking that they went and put in a new clutch disc, reused the pressure plate, re-machined the flywheel, and the fact that they reused the pressure plate and it had so much wear is why everything failed, why it was slipping again. So I'm pretty confident with this factory setup we have here, this organic clutch, this brand new pressure plate, everything's good there. I think we're gonna have it nailed, and we're not gonna have any problems with the clutch once it's all back together. Now there's a couple other things that we will take care of while we're back here. And one of the big ones are these seals right here. I should say this is the factory one that's all deformed. Should probably give you some context before we talk about those. They're right here. They're called the triple seals. This is the input shaft going into the clutch. This is the output shaft going into the transmission. I have the input shaft pulled out of the engine right now, and you can see that groove right there is where one of those seals were. But this splines into the crankshaft like that. You can see now I can't turn it. These seals right here are responsible for sealing the input shaft outside diameter to the inside diameter of the input shaft of the transmission, or the output shaft into the transmission here. And what happens is if these leak, gear oil comes down the shaft, it comes in through the spines here, and it actually works its way into the flywheel. Now our flywheel is a dual mass flywheel, so if oil is going to get down inside the flywheel, it gets inside there, it breaks down the grease inside the flywheel, so the grease is no longer effective, and then the flywheel starts to rattle, and you have other issues there to where you need to go in and repack and rebuild the flywheel. So anytime you have a clutch off, replace those triple seals. Now I showed you guys a little peek. Here's the factory triple seal. These are like a Teflon. They're very hard. You can see they're very firm. And to get them on, you actually have to stretch them. They get them over the shaft, they get them into the grooves. That's not as bad as the fact that once they're stretched, you have to compress them back down so that way you can get them back in to the input shaft of the transmission. These factory seals are a pain in the butt. And it's really a low pressure area, and the way this seal is, it's just really relying on friction for it to seal, and they don't seal that great. I don't like it. So I'm replacing them with these seals right here. These are aftermarket, and they're a Viton seal, so it's more of just a traditional seal here, so it's gonna be a lot easier to stretch on. It's gonna not have to be compressed to get back in this place, and you see how there's a difference on each side. This side has more surface area on the back of the seal, so that way it's going to seal a lot better because everything pushing on the back of the seal there in that groove is then going to make the seal essentially expand on the inside and outside diameter, so it seals up very well. So I'm going to get those replaced before we put everything back together. And I also replaced this O-ring up here, and that's another part that helps seal everything up. So this is all stuff to protect our flywheel. Now, standard things on the clutch, we're going to use some Sachs clutch grease right here. Lightly lubricate our input spline shafts so everything's good. And I use, believe it or not guys, I use just a generic tool for setting up my clutches rather than anything specific to these cars. This thing has a bunch of different adapters that fit into where your pilot bearings go. This one's fitting in the flywheel quite nicely. And I'll give you a little tip. You can see right here I have some blue tape on it. That's because the size of the adapters I had, none of them fit very tightly into the pilot bearing here. And if you have that, just wrap a little bit of tape around it until you get a nice good tight fit, and you can make that tool work. I've had this tool for years. I use it all the time. I don't think there's ever been a clutch that I've had that this hasn't worked on getting everything lined up. It's a great tool, great bang for your buck. You don't need anything Ferrari specific. It just has this taper cone that goes in and sits into your pressure plate, lines everything up. So it's worked great for me. So I'll get our new clutch put into our flywheel, get everything torqued the spec, and get our seals replaced, and then I'll get the flywheel or the bell housing all assembled and back onto the back of the gearbox or drivetrain. And yeah, once we get that taken care of, I'll probably come back and update you with what is remaining on our drivetrain here on this 355. Welcome back, guys. Now I'm gonna have to admit that it's actually been a couple weeks since we last worked on a 355 project. So I figured I'll bring you guys back and kind of get you caught up with where we're at. And where we last left off, we were working to get the clutch reinstalled, and you can see that it is completely reinstalled with what little we can view of it here. And you can see that I actually have the drivetrain and everything tucked away as tight as I can. And that's because we have another client's car in the shop. This is a 1995 456 GT. This is not the same 456 that's been in the shop. And we also have a 2009 F430 Spider back here that I've been working on. The reason why we have these other cars in the shop, and you can see that the 355 is off the lift, it's pushed off the side, that is because I'm still waiting on parts for this car. I essentially have gotten this drivetrain as assembled as far as I can go, and all the work that I can possibly do to the car until I get the remaining parts. So where we're currently at is I am waiting on a radiator, so we can put the radiator in the car. We need to address all of the coolant hoses, and also at the same time when I'm doing that, I'm going to replace the fuel filters because they're right up there next to the coolant hoses. We have a little bit of work to do in the front of the car where I need to put in an AC receiver dryer and do a little bit of work to the water valve or heater valve because it's bypassed. We're going to reconnect it and see if we can get a functional heater back into this car. As for the engine, I need to get the starter and alternator back from the rebuilder so I can put them on the engine, finalize installing all of my belts, get my oil tank put on my last of my hoses, and essentially at that point the drivetrain is ready to go back into the car. So it's really the three main things that we're waiting on: the radiator, the starter, and the alternator. Once I have those components, it's game on. We're going to keep moving on this project, but I don't know the ETA on those parts. And also, once those parts come in, I need to finish up these other cars I have here in the shop right now so I can get back to this 355. So my plan here is pretty much just to wrap this video up at this point, and then I'm going to focus on these other cars. Once we have our parts back for this 355 project, I'll bring you guys back and we'll continue along with this project, get it finished up, get this car out on the road, and see how it runs. With that, guys, I just want to say thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your support. For those channel members that have subscribed, I really do appreciate the extra support and love you're showing me. Be sure to drop a comment below, guys, share the video, hit the like button, hit the hype button, and as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.